Well, hello again, my friends, and welcome once more to the Invisible College, or welcome if you're new to the Invisible College for the first time. Uh, this is an institution that I set up on the internet some years ago to really get into examining and exploring the esoteric traditions, particularly of the West, and that in the main means Christianity. Now, I want you to understand and get clear that that does not mean that I dismiss all other cultures as having absolutely no use and everybody living there that's not a Christian is going to hell. I don't think like that. I believe that there are good people in every land and every culture. And indeed, these other cultures have given the world great treasures. For example, India has given us yoga. And I practice yoga. You don't have to believe in gods with elephant heads and 6 arms and all that stuff. Leave that to the Hindus if that's what they want. But as a practical process of training your body in particular, it's very, very useful. It doesn't need a lot of space. It doesn't need a lot of equipment, and you'll feel much better for doing it. And similarly with China, China's given us this great system of medicine. We generally refer to as acupuncture, but that's only one part of it. They had an incredible knowledge about energy flows within the body. You can interrupt those and work with them using needles, as they do in acupuncture, but there's many other ways to work with that system and get your body into a better state. And if your body's in a better state, your mind is going to have more of a chance to get into a better state. So that's another gift. And I will be investigating those things further in courses that we do later. So I don't dismiss other people's cultures. Islam, for example, yes, it is a sort of early Protestantism, I would call it. It's basically an offshoot from Christianity. I know it's not looked at that way, but that's how it came about. And I don't agree with Islamic fundamentalism. Of course I don't, cutting people's heads off and all of that. But I do respect that they take their religion very seriously in the Islamic countries, and people practice fasting for Ramadan. We don't bother, most of us, with Lent anymore, or Advent. We did when I was a kid, but we don't these days. So we've lost that side of our Christian tradition. They're continuing with their devotions in that way, praying 5 times a day and all of that. Yeah, you've got to hand it to them that those are good things. I do believe that if they really want to find God and find the way, they should take the Bible seriously. And I'll come back to that in a little bit. So today I'm going to be talking about prophecy. And why do I talk about prophecy? Well, in particular, in Christianity, there are all sorts of prophecies that, or I should say also in Judaism, all sorts of prophecies in the Bible, some of which have already happened, and many of which relate to the end of the age. And we're at the end of the age. I think I'm not alone in saying that, not now anyway. And so it matters to us. You know, we're the people living at the times in those days, or at that time, it says often in the Bible, at that time, such and such will happen. At that time generally means at the end of days. And that means the end of the present age. Now, you've all heard about the idea of the age of Aquarius, but we're actually at the end of, not just the end of Pisces, the start of Aquarius, using the star clock in the sky, but we're at the end of a much longer age, much longer period, the end of a whole precession of the equinox that takes roughly 26,000 years. The last big half cycle change was the last ice age, approximately 13,000 years ago. So we're talking about 11,000 BC, and something very big happened then. We know it did. The ice caps melted, everything changed, and we've had developments going on ever since then. And we've had other subdivisions of that, which, as I say, there's this kind of star clock. It's not astrology I'm talking about here. It's about using the position of the spring equinox and the summer solstice also to tell you what period in this longer cycle that you're in. And these cycles are just seasons. It's like in the year, we have seasons. We have, just moved into spring as I'm telling you this. We have spring, summer, autumn, winter, and then we're back to spring again. So there are these cycles, and there are these much longer cycles to do with the Earth-Sun relationship and the position of the pole in particular. The Earth, has this motion that's described as precession. That's actually not a very good description, but it means that the pole is pointing at different places in the sky during that cycle. It goes around like that. And according to where it's pointing, so it gets more sunshine or less on those polar areas. So that's what brings about ice ages in particular. And far from global warming, I do believe that we're moving towards a new ice age, but that's another story. So what am I going to talk about here? I'm talking about the prophecies of the end of the age, and in particular, prophecy for America. I'll talk a lot I have already made a number of videos to do with the book of Revelation. I think it's over 20 videos now. And I will be making other videos on other prophecies in the Bible. It's a fantastic book. It's much more interesting than Madame Blavatsky's, Secret Doctrine or the Bhagavad Gita. We don't need that. We've got our own book of mysteries. So let's study that and get to grips with it, because it's full of prophecies. But the prophecy I want to talk to you today is one that was shown to me personally. It's actually almost exactly 50 years ago. And I'll put you into the background of how this came about. I've been on my path, you might say, for several years at that time. I was only 23 years old, and I'd really come into the path at age 20. And at age 20, I realized the error of my ways, too much beer, too much playing around, too much ignoring the big questions. And I started getting really deeply into philosophy, and I started practicing yoga. And I've done that on and off different times, more off than on, I have to admit, for the rest of my life. But I started getting into studying, particularly Eastern religion at that time. And then I was going to go to India. I was planning to find myself a guru. So many people were thinking that way. I'm talking about 1969. And in 1972, a friend of mine and I, we went to Israel, and the plan was to have a look around there, go and see the sites, go and visit Jerusalem, Bethlehem, go up. We worked on a kibbutz actually up in the north, so places like Nazareth and the Sea of Galilee were not that far away. We could go and visit those easily. So we wanted to go and see that, but my plan then was to go on to India to find a guru. But while I was in Israel, I met an extraordinary man who was sitting in a corner. I was working in a little hostel, a youth hostel at that time, and he was staying there. And he was an older man and he was studying his Bible very intently, and no one else would talk to him. So I thought, well, this looks like an interesting character. I'll go and have a chat. And I thought seems American. I think now, looking back, he was more likely Canadian, but I didn't know the difference in those days. So, well, I knew the difference, Canada and USA, but I didn't know the difference in the accents. So anyway, I had a long chat with him, well, several chats actually, and he showed me things in the Bible to do with prophecies and explained a lot to me that I had no idea about before. And bear in mind that I was brought up as a Roman Catholic, and I went to one of the top Catholic schools in England. I went to a school which was also a seminary. I wasn't planning to be a priest myself, but maybe a third of the boys were. And we would have to learn Latin and Greek. We would attend Mass in Latin in those days. We were taught by priests, and we spent a lot of time on religious instruction. But nobody had ever talked to me about the Bible in the way that this guy did, explaining different prophecies and showing me how they related one piece to another piece. And it says in, I think it's the book of Isaiah, I think about chapter 48, I might be wrong on that. He talks about how the knowledge is a little bit here and a little bit there a bit, there a bit. And that's how it is in the Bible. It's a one big text. And to understand it, you have to actually read it. And you don't always get everything in the one text that you look at. The theme might be started way back near the beginning, and then further explanations come hundreds of years later from different prophets, picking up that theme and developing it further. And Isaiah was one of those guys. So I'll give you another example, actually. I've been doing, as I said, a lot on the book of Revelation, but you won't really understand the Revelation. That's the last book in the Bible, the Christian Bible, written by St. John, who is one of the apostles, you may remember. And it's an extraordinary book. And these beasts coming out of the sea, 666, horsemen of the apocalypse, all that. It's really mind-blowing stuff, but you won't understand it if you don't first read and get to grips with the book of Daniel in the Old Testament, because the revelation of St. John actually picks up where Daniel left off. It's an extraordinary thing. And when you actually go into it, as I've done, you begin to understand more about it. You understand that these are images that John has been given. They're not expecting dragons to come out of the water or the beasts come out of the earth and this sort of thing, and woman come riding in on a seven-headed dragon. These are symbols, and they're symbols of political changes, symbols of things happening in the world, awful things quite often, that then good things as well. So you have to understand it symbolically and not take it all literally. That there are literal things going to happen or are happening, but the descriptions you get within the Bible itself, within the book of Revelation, are symbols. And I had a personal experience of something rather similar when I was in America for the first time, which was in 1973. Now, again, I'll give you a little bit of background here. I went to America to visit a family, and there was a gentleman, the father of this family, who was very skilled in helping people to remember their past lives. Now, you're probably also saying, oh, heretic, we only have one. Get it right in this one, Adrian, or you're finished. Well, I actually don't believe that. I don't believe that because I know something about my past lives. You would too if you've been through through this. The reason we don't remember our past lives is because it would get in the way of us living this one properly. If we did, I mean, say you had been a king in a previous life and now you're a road sweeper, you're going to be thinking, well, why am I, sweeping roads? I should be riding in the golden carriage. And vice versa. You think, you're now in the royal family, say, and you'll say, well, I'm only a humble road sweeper. What am I doing here? It would get in the way. It's a bit like, you know, in Shakespeare, he says a famous quote, all the world is a stage. And we go through these different acts. In your own life, you go through the stage of being a baby and a toddler and a schoolboy or girl. You become the blushing lover, and then you become the soldier, and you the businessman, and then you end up as the old fool in his slippers, who's can't remember anything. He's sans mind, I think it says there. Who does that remind you of? Well, we'll come back to him shortly. So in your own life, you have lives within a life. You're not the same person. I'm in my 70s now. I'm not the same person. Well, I am in many ways as I was in my 20s, but my attitudes and my mentality have changed enormously. I see things in a very different perspective. I'm not driven by the same passions that I was. I mean, it's true of all older people, isn't it? You go through different stages in your life. And it's the same with past lives. You'll go through certain acts. You come onto the stage to perform a role, a part. And during that part, you come in as a baby. You're not unformed, actually. You have a lot in you which is already there. And you see this with small children. They're all different. You'd expect them, if they're a blank sheet, to be all the same. But if you come from even a medium-sized family, it's 3 kids, say, or 2 kids even, you notice that they're different. They have different skills, different aptitudes, different ways of looking at things, different temperaments. And as you grow up, you develop a personality. You need it. A personality means a persona, a mask. That's the Greek word, persona, means a mask. You develop a mask that you show to the world. Actually, you develop a number of masks that you show in different situations. You're different with your close friends than you are with your employer. And you're different again with your parents and your family. And you're different again when you're going on a date for the first time. You put on a different mask, different role. So we all have a number of these roles that we adopt, and that is part and parcel of your performance that you're doing in that life. And each time you come back on the stage with a different life to do different things. So you don't need those old masks, those old performances. You have to develop new ones. And if you remembered everything about your past, your soul's past, yes, this body that you've got is a one-off, but you're going to come back into different bodies and different families and different situations, different periods in history, and you have to develop yourself appropriately with the right masks for that situation. So anyway, I'm digressing a bit here, but coming back to America, I was doing this experience where this gentleman was able to put me in a sort of mild hypnotism. I was conscious, it wasn't an unconscious situation. I was totally conscious, but my eyes shut and I started flickering, which is you're going into a kind of REM state when that happens. And I knew that. and I started seeing images, and I went back through this life, right back to when I was a toddler. I mean, everything, as I went back through this life, the different stages, I could see everything so clearly. The places where I'd lived, the people that I'd known at that time, many of them, well, most of them dead now, uh, the smells of particular places, they came back very, very strongly. And then I went back, and then suddenly I found myself off the planet and in space. And I had a whole series of visions to do with the end of the world. And I didn't know it's the end of the world at that time. I thought this was imminent. And I was absolutely terrified. And I wrote to my father back in England. And I said, look, Dad, you've got to, be careful. It's going to be the end of the world. And, watch out for this, that, and the other. And he wrote back and said, well, I think it's time you came home, Adrian. I think you've been staying with those Americans too long. Anyway, yeah. I now realize that these visions were not for that immediate time. They were to do with the end of the world. And I had a particular vision about America. At that time, it didn't make a lot of sense. America was going through, it's always going through things. I think the Nixon business was going on at that time. He wasn't quite out of office, but the whole business of Watergate was all going on. So there was a sense of a bit of, tension in the air over that. But apart from that, and there was the other thing, was that girl, what was his name? I've forgotten her name now. The daughter of the newspaper heir, or she was the heiress, and she was kidnapped by a gang of terrorists, and then she ended up joining them. Do you remember that? I can't remember her name now. If you're American, you know all about this. So that was going on as well. But anyway, I had these visions, and one of these visions was to do with America. And I didn't really understand it that clearly. I'm English, and I was only 23, and we didn't do American history at school. I didn't know much about American history, to be honest, other than what I've watched on TV. I used to watch all the Westerns, Gunsmoke and Laramie and Wagon Train. We had loads of them in American TV. So we knew all about cowboys and Indians. We knew all about Wyatt Earp. We knew all about that side of things, but we didn't really know very much about America itself. Didn't really understand just how big it was until I started hitchhiking across it. And then I discovered. Anyway, so I had this vision, and it began with, I was seeing this kind of farmhouse, the clapboard farmhouse, with a white picket fence and a lawn in front of it, a white picket fence. And I was told, given in my mind, the name White House. And sitting on top of this White House was a glorious eagle. It was a big eagle, and it had beautiful plumage, and it sat there regally on top of the White House. And the White House was beautifully painted. It was well made. It was homely because, America at its roots is a homely kind of place. I love America, I have to say. I love the American people. I'm shocked terribly at what's going on in America now. And I'm even more shocked by the total, how can I put it? The pervasiveness of drugs of all sorts, and the way that has destroyed so many lives in America, much more than here. And even while I was in America, even while it was reasonably stable in 73, there was a lot of drug taking, and that did shock me. Seeing everyone I met had a stash, and they were all open to taking whatever came into town and having a go at it. I was shocked, Yes, we do have obviously drug business in Europe and Britain, but nothing like on the scale that I saw in America. So the seeds were sort of sown even then. But in my dream, it wasn't a dream, it was a vision. In my vision, I saw this White House, clapboard, well painted, nice looking place with a picket fence around it. And then it morphed, it changed, and it became dilapidated. The paint was peeling off it. Some of the boards are slipped and there's just kind of holes. And the glorious, beautiful eagle was turned into a cockerel. And first of all, it was on top, crowing away like a cockerel. A barnyard fowl. And then, as I saw it, it came down onto the lawn, and it was stripped of its feathers. The feathers were pulled out, and only leaving a few. And there's this bald, not a bald eagle, a bald cockerel, pecking around on the lawn, looking for food. And I was told this is what will happen to America. Now, I see this as a cautionary tale for you if you're American, because America's heading fast down that pathway. It's heading fast. It's turned its back on the Bible. It's turned its back on the Christian values that built it. And its love of God, its love of truth, its upholding of high standards of morality. Yes, there's always been crooks. There's always been bad guys. There's always been, I've seen enough Westerns to know that. The bad guys ride into town, get drunk in the saloon bar, start shooting the place up, killing a few people. But there was always some good people that would fight back, that would deal with the bad guys, sort them out, clean up town, and get things back. The good guys with the white hats, they were always there. But now it's not like that anymore, is it? You don't have heroes anymore. You have anti-heroes. Yeah, the bad guy, yeah, he's bad, but he's kind of fun, isn't he? Has taken over. And you don't have enough people holding to high standards. And in that situation, you can't be surprised if heaven turns its back on you. It's happened to us here. But it's going to happen, or it's already happening to you over there. There are some good guys. I do watch certain of your prophets and preachers. Now, I'm not a Bible basher. I'm not like that at all. I'm actually quite New Age in many respects. I do understand that there is a lot of demonic stuff going on under the guise of New Age, but I understand we're moving into a new age. We have no choice about that, and there is a lot of knowledge coming in, and there's opportunities for study that we never had before, with the internet, for example. When I started writing books, to research things meant going to the library or buying the books yourself, or else if it's a really rare book, having to go to the British Library in London, which holds, like the Library of Congress. It's got a huge library of everything and a lot of manuscripts and documents and all sorts of stuff that you won't find anywhere else. Now, an awful lot of that stuff is on the internet. They scanned it and put it up on the internet. So you don't have to go anywhere away from your desk to do a lot of the research that was painstaking for me when I was writing books like The Holy Kingdom, for example, about King Arthur. There were books there we talked about you couldn't get, you couldn't see. They're very, very rare. Now you can download a copy off the internet. So there are good things about this new age as well as bad things. But we have come to a situation where certain demonic forces have been released. We're in the midst of the book of Revelation, and there's a bit where they open the trapdoor and all the nasty things fly out and bring about plagues. And one of those plagues, the first woe, I believe, was the COVID that the whole world has gone through. That was a demonic attack. It wasn't just, new variants of bat disease that somehow jumped onto humans from a fish market in China. It wasn't that. There was demonic activity that brought that about. Crazy people doing experiments in a laboratory on these viruses that they should never have even thought about, let alone done. And of course, this was a demonic attack. And these people didn't realize, or if they did realize, they thought they were strong enough to cope with it. They could sort it out. But we know the result, don't we? But there's other things like this going to be happening. We know this. That was only the first woe. There's two more to come in the book of Revelation. But anyway, I don't know if it shock you on that. The second vision I had, which was to do with America, I believe, was I saw a spaceship taking off from Cape Canaveral, and it got into the upper atmosphere, and it was attacked by a gigantic praying mantis. And I was told the praying mantis represented Satan, the devil. And the devil was really angry that the human race, through technology, was getting into a situation where they were going to break free. And he attacked this spaceship and tore a panel off it, this praying mantis. Now, I wondered at the time, why a praying mantis? Why not a dragon? Why not a snake? Why a praying mantis? And it's only recently I saw a wildlife film talking about praying mantises. And they are the most ferocious predators that you can imagine. I mean, yes, not for us because they're not big enough, but they will attack things much bigger than themselves. They'll attack and they won't let go, and they keep on and on and on. They can kill mice, and I think they can even kill other small mammals, birds. They can catch birds and kill them, and they are most ferocious insects that you can imagine, and some of them are quite large. So that's why I think that this image of the mantis was given to me, that it showed the persistence of this opponent. It doesn't give up. It does attack, and it's a stealth attacker as well. It can spring out on things very fast, unexpectedly. And that's the nature of what we're dealing with. And don't underestimate that there are demonic forces in this world. I've met some of them. And if you are not protected by Jesus Christ and the angels, then you can get into real trouble playing around with the occult, playing around with black magic. I've seen it. And it can destroy your life for you, let alone the afterlife. So this attack on this spaceship, again, I think that symbolized the idea of the spaceship, the ability to be able to leave the Earth. And I've made a lot of videos, and I've talked about this before, but I'll say it again, that what we read in the Bible and the Christian religion today, Judeo-Christian, I'll call it, is actually a rescue mission. That humanity got itself trapped on this planet, the souls of humanity. And we got ourselves into a situation where we should be graduating. It should be the souls come here, they have the experience of being in a body, they have the experience of taking on a situation where they're detached enough to have free will. That's what it's all about. Your body provides you with energies. You are able to eat food, drink water, and your body will process that. You breathe the air, and it will make electricity out of that. And from that electricity, you can run your brain, and the rest of everything in your body runs on electricity. You may not be aware of that, but it's true. That's why the acupuncture thing works so well, because it's to do with electricity. People used to call this breath. Spiritus is the Latin word for breath. And in India, it's the same. They call it prana. And in Chinese, they call it qi or ki. In Greek, they call it anima. So if something's animated, it's got breath. So everything that breathes, we call life, alive. And when you breathe out, you take your first breath at birth. Yeah, you haven't breathed before that first smack on the backside, and you take your first breath. And then you breathe out your last breath with your death rattle or whatever happens. That breath goes out into the air. And that is a symbol for how your living force, your life, your soul leaves your body to become invisible in the atmosphere. And depending on how you've done in this life, you go through a kind of review, and then you go through maybe some correction, and then you come back and do it again. If you haven't reached the grade that you can progress off this world. So that is what we're really about, is trying to have the experience here of what it's like to take decisions. Because if you're totally linked to the will of God, you're not taking decisions, you're enacting what he asks of you. But you also need to learn how to grow up. It's like a child, if the parents take all the decisions and they give the child no freedom, that child is not going to mature properly. So if you're a parent, I'm a parent. If you're a parent, you have to learn, you have to take the risk of letting your child bit by bit have more freedom. Initially, very little. Then you kind of gradually let that grow a bit. And you let them go for sleepovers at friends' houses, for example. Or you let them go on their own to do this or that. But you have to be very aware that there are dangers out there, and you have to teach them that there are dangers out there, and they've got to be careful. But if you don't let them experience life and grow up, they're going to be very weak when they're adults, and you won't always be there to look after them. So you have to do that. You have to let them grow as well. I think it can happen to any of us at any time, but this is a world where there are dangers, and it's best if you learn to grow up. So it's a bit like that, I think, why we're sent here in the first place. It's to go through lessons of life and learn that God's way is the right way. And the challenge, you always got this tempting challenger who wants to seduce you away from the path. because he doesn't want you to leave. He feeds off you. He feeds off the likes of you. He doesn't want you to leave. Doesn't want anyone to leave. But we're coming to the end of the age now, and things are going to happen in a big way. So I see this as, again, a challenge that we're seeing now for the first time since 73, that the period I was in America was just after, I think the last Apollo mission was in 72. And I was kicking myself that I hadn't come over to America in time to see a moonshot. I'd love to have seen one of those big Atlas rockets taking off. You know, never going to happen now. But we're now in a situation where America's attempting to go back to the moon. And not only that, Elon Musk, extraordinary person in my view, I hope he's on the right side, certainly extraordinary, has developed the SpaceX rockets. And, not just him personally, got a fantastic team there, but the team will only be as good as the leader who pushes them and gets them and provides the resources and so on, inspires them. He's the general, he's the king of that institution. And he's got good people, and they're doing things that have never been done before. These rockets that come back and land again, at least the booster part, and then it can reuse it over and over and over again. And that's the way. I'm not sure that this is the best way to approach space anyway, to be honest with you, because, you have a soul, and if you develop yourself, you will be able to leave this body behind. You won't need it. This body is designed for this earth. It breathes the air here, it eats the food here, it drinks the water here. Take it to another environment, and the very best, you might well find that something that looks tasty to eat is actually poisonous, as far as we're concerned, not to the people who live there. So, yes, I do believe other planets are inhabited too. I don't think we're alone in that sense. So you need to develop your higher self, your higher bodies, so that you come to a point where you can enter the symbolic spaceship that comes at the end of the book of Revelation, called the New Jerusalem, and be taken away to the heaven. So I've been talking a lot about those kind of things, but you in America, I think you're on the cusp now. I think you're in great danger. That's why I'm making this video. You've got a geriatric old man who doesn't know half the things he's doing as your president. And that's like that. Instead of having an eagle, you've got a old cockerel who's had his feathers pulled out. That's what you've got. And you've got to decide now, are you going to be so stupid to let this kind of situation continue? Let your country be torn apart to rack and ruin by a bull cockerel. I can talk, can't I? Or are you going to be more sensible and stop this idiocy? The idiocy of men can be women and women can be men. It's not true. To be a man, you have a Y chromosome. If you're a woman, you have an XX, and if you're a man, you have an XY. You know that. Don't need me to tell you. Anything else is play acting, and you know that. But people will tell you lies. They're turning the truth round, and you've got to confront that, because you're heading towards being not just a clapped out White House with a cockerel. You're going to end up with no White House at all, and with a dead cockerel. And that's the danger that I see it. And that's why I'm telling you now, 50 years later, the prophecy I saw, which I never thought I'd ever see anything like what's happening now. Never thought that in my wildest dreams. But you have demons living among you, and you must stand up, and you must take possession back of your country. There are some very good preachers, by the way. I often watch a guy called Sid Roth. Maybe you see his programs. He has a lot of guests come on. And there's one in particular, a guy called Mario Murillo, who's, I'd love to visit one of his tent meetings he has. He's an old-fashioned evangelist, preacher, and he fills these tents with people, and then miraculous healings happen. You know, people have been paralyzed for decades, suddenly get up and walk. All sorts of cancers get healed and things like that. I mean, this is the sort of thing that used to be done by the apostles. It's why the Christian religion took off. It took off because there were people like this that showed there is a higher power in this world, and that higher power, God, can enact miracles. So I just wanted to tell you, I love you, America. I love you, Americans. I don't want to see awful things happening to you. Yeah, you are actually of Israel, but that's another story. And we will come back to that another time. So thank you for listening, and I hope you found this useful. And I look forward to speaking to you again. Thank you very much.